Hi, it's Jared from Strong Roots Farm. Today we're going to talk about how low do you graze your pastures. That's coming up after this. We're out here in the pasture today, and I've got this question a lot recently about how low I take my pastures. How much do we graze? How long do I wait? And so it kind of depends. There's a lot of theories out there. You maybe have heard, if you've done any kind of research, the take a third, trample a third, eat a third, leave a third, whatever you want to hear on that, or the take the top half, leave the bottom half. And so what do? Let's kind of go into some different scenarios. I have some different levels of grass here right at this time as we enter into summer. And I'm going to talk to you some reasons it's not cookie cutter. We make different decisions based off of our need at that time. Let's go through some of those that might help you. As you look behind me, what we're grazing now, we have anywhere from 8 to 16 inches of grass throughout this paddock. This paddock was grazed around 45 to 60 days ago. I can find you the actual date, but we're grazing this a little earlier than I typically would. In fact, I have paddocks up towards the house that haven't been grazed for longer. I've got some 90-day paddocks up there. So why am I grazing this? I'll get into that in a minute for the reason why, but it's okay to graze at this height. In fact, there's a lot of nutrients and palatability and digestibility at this level, and this is really where they like to be. If you can graze like this all the time, it's a great situation, but how quickly does it come back? That's your problem. Here in Ohio, with the rainfall that we have, we tend to graze a little taller than this because we can't keep up with it this time of year. We've went through our spring flush, but our grass, we're still getting enough rain, even in this drought, that our grass is still growing real well. On a paddock like this, I'm gonna take half and leave half. So I'm gonna take it down to 6 or 8 inches, maybe 4 in some spots on a traditional time period, and then I'm gonna leave and move on. I'll go through, I might bush hog everything down to the 6 inches, but that's really kind of where I wanna be if my grass was this short, which this is not typical, so why am I doing it now? As you see here behind me, you can see where they've grazed and what they just came into today. And I've grazed down very tight. Now this is some of the poorer pasture. It's in the very back of our farm, and we're trying to change some of the nutrients back here, so you can see that there is some weed pressure. So not only did I graze super tight, like 2 inches, they've taken it down to the ground. There's not much left. I'm also gonna come in and bush hog this very tightly. So it will look like this. It'll look like a golf course lawnmower, which is never very good. It's not a good practice to have, but I've got something going on. Because I'm looking to increase the organic matter in this, I've seeded this. Also, without making you dizzy, it's next to my woods. So what we did was we seeded this in summer annuals. We allowed the cows to step it in. So I seeded it about 4 or 5 days ago. When they first started in, I seeded this section. We're gonna graze through it. We'll be done in 2 days. So within 4 days, 3 to 4 days of seeding, the cows have stepped it all in. They've also grazed off everything that's gonna be a competitor to my summer annuals. And then, which they also got fed. I also fed them for those days as we were moving through. So we got grazing economics off of it, if you will. Also, I'm gonna come in and top this super tight, giving anything that was not grazed back to the ground as a nutrient for what's the seed that's coming in. So I'm only grazing this tight due to a specific instance, which is I'm trying to get summer annuals to grow in this section so that later in July and August, when I'm grazing, this is a spot I'm grazing from. It'll have a large stand as tall as this fence, hopefully, of summer annuals, and then they can come into the woods during the heat of the day for coolness. I have water back here. We fixed our water issue. And so this is one of the few times that I'm grazing this tight. Here behind me, we have a pasture that I grazed exactly 30 days ago. We grazed this down to 6 to 8 inches. I came through with my bush hog, topped the weeds to try to reduce some weed pressure. You can see the weed pressure is much better in this area. We have alfalfa, we have purple top clover, we have some timothy, we have orchard grass, and of course, we're in Ohio in the fescue belt, and so we will have some fescue. I'm topping this. I want to reduce as much fescue on this farm as I can, but this is what a paddock can look like after 30 days of grazing down to 6 inches and topping. There's 12, 14 inches of growth here. It will be at least another 3 to 4 weeks before I'm back to this. I'll at least hit 60 days, maybe 80 days before I graze this paddock again. We're gonna go all the way back up front where the fescue's worse. We'll talk about that. In this section, we were here 75 days ago. Where we're gonna start grazing once we're done stepping in that seat is all the way back up here at the front, working our way this way. You can see how tall the fescue is here. This is where we're gonna graze now. We'll graze this down to 6, 8 inches. We'll top it with our bush hog if we need to, and we'll come through. Here is my test line. I'm not sure if you can see that very well. Over here, we have more fescue than we do here. This was grazed on the same day. And so my goal was when I came through in this part of the farm, I did not top. We grazed this, like I said, 75 to 90 days ago. And I didn't go through with the bush hog and top because the weed pressure was not that high. Over here, the weed pressure was the same, but I decided to top because I wanted to see what I could do to the fescue. But my concern was, can I get rid of some of the fescue without getting rid of the underlayment grasses that are gonna be there? Is the fescue gonna keep it the same level? Is the fescue gonna hinder it? Or is the fescue gonna allow it to grow more? Is the bush hogging gonna prevent grass growth? So as you see out, there is a little bit more growth underlayment in my orchard grasses and clovers over here than over here. But my ratios are different. Over here where I topped, my alfalfas, my orchard grasses, and my clovers, I have more legumes on this side where I topped with the bush hog than I do over here where the fescue is. So I'm learning that I should have topped this all. After my spring, as I've gone through in the spring, this has all been grazed one time this year. I should have hit this a little harder with the bush hog. I should have come through, tried to get rid of some more fescue and hit all this, but it's live and learn. It's a good test. I wanted to see how this farm would react. First time grazing this year. And so we're gonna graze, but you can see there is a decent amount of underlayment growth on this side of the farm, more than over here forage. Of course, as we move this way, it'll get less and less because it was grazed earlier. So this is what we want our pastures to look like if we're gonna graze down to that 6 to 8 inches. We have good forage. We're not stockpiling yet. This is we're in mid-June, so late spring here in Ohio. If you're watching this video at a different time, but this is what we're gonna come into, and I'm happy with this growth. I took half, I left half. That's the way we're going in this method. Over here in this field, we've grazed this two weeks at this end, probably 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks towards that end of the pasture on this field here. So you can see there's some good growth back. It's not super splotchy with manure. We did space it out and spread it out a little bit, but this was grazed, same thing, 6, 8 inches. And then we topped it at 6 inches, went through with the bush hog and hit everything. Weed pressure looks great. We're getting good growth back. We've had a little bit of rain. You can definitely see some dry matter out here. We've been in this drought, but as the rains come, the grass is turning green. It will easily be ready before we're ready to hit it. So I could graze it early, but we're gonna let this grow up to 16 inches, hopefully 18, 20 if we're lucky, if we get enough rain. But the field is recovering. Taking it down that far did not hurt me. Taking it down lower will. So I hope those examples helped you, but I feel like I need to give a little bit of a recap on why and what we do at certain times. So what I like to do is the very first time I come through in the spring, as long as it's not too wet, as long as I'm not muddying it up, if it's dry enough mid-March when I come through, I'm gonna graze down pretty tight in Ohio because I know the spring flush of grass is gonna boom before I can get back to it. So I'm willing to take it down a little bit to slow the grass down. That's about the only time I like to take down that low, unless I'm using the cattle as a seeder. So I'm not no-tilling drilling this in. I'm broadcasting the seed in, stepping it in with the cattle, and then topping it with the bush hog in order to get as much thatch around it as I possibly can. If you watch back on some of my other videos on how I seeded, I've also spread some manure and done some other things, but we're using the cows as the seeder. That's the only reason I want to take it down that low this time of year. If you only have what we have here behind us, this 8, 12 inches, 14 inches in spots of grass, you're going to take more than half. And you have to do what you have to do to feed your animals. This might be a good time to supplement with some hay if you're in a drier area or an area that doesn't have enough grass. If that's the case, you should be looking at stocking densities. You've got something off for that time of year or for that farm or whatever you have. It may be a good time to go ahead and call some of those bad cows, call some of those calves that aren't gaining so well on grass to get your stocking densities right, to get your grass up. My stocking density is a little low on this farm. My grass is growing faster than I can keep up with it, and I'm just looking to buy more calves. But when you look at the grass, that determines how low I'm going to take it. So taking half and leaving half is not a good ratio if you only have 8 inches, because then you're down to 4 inches. You want to try to leave 6 inches of grass so that the grass booms back as quickly as possible. If they go through and they're plucking all of the clovers and the alfalfas and leaving a bunch of brambles, leaving a bunch of stuff, you're not taking enough. So you've given them too big of a square in your paddock move. You need to make your sizes smaller on your paddocks. So it's a lot of give and take, a lot of just learning and watching, and that kind of determines how big our paddocks are, how fast we move, and if we top or we don't. But overall, those are some instances. So graze real low if you want to seed, graze real low in the early spring when you know you're going to have 90 days back and you're going to hit a spring flush. Otherwise, try to get it to 16 inches and take it to 8. Try to get it to 15, 14 inches and take it to 6. But don't take it lower than 6 if you want good growth back. Those are my recommendations to you. So bush hogging versus not bush hogging, topping versus not topping, what do you do? I probably should come through now if I had a better bush hog and top all that fescue just to keep it out of my calves. So there's instances there where you can come through and top. If you have more grass than you have animals, you could come through and top at 18 inches, 16 inches tall and top everything high. And that way you could keep the production where you wanted it in order to give your calves time to get there in their paddock move. That's one reason to bush hog. Another reason is to remove weed pressure. So you can do it prior, as the grass is already 8, 12 inches tall, you can just go ahead and add thatch and take it down to 6, 8 and try to remove some of that weed pressure, allowing the grasses to overcome those weeds. Or you can do it after you graze like I'm doing, where you let the cows take it from 16 to 18 inches down to that 6, and then you top everything that they leave, adding it back to the soil. So there's many different ways to top, many different ways to bush hog. You can let it go, you cannot. It all kind of depends on your instance and what you need to do at that time. Lastly, the only other instance where I will graze tighter than 6 inches is when I would call a sacrifice lot. And so we have about 4 acres up around the barn. We have summer annuals seeded to that now, if you've watched my prior videos. We will also seed winter annuals in those sections. Those are the parts or the sections of our farm where the cows will come out, they will graze, and they'll be able to go back to the barn. There's automatic waters that are frost resistant. So that's a good section for us to plant winter annuals. I will allow them to take the winter annuals tighter than the 6 inches. Those are sacrifice lots, which means where everywhere else on my farm, I'm going to get 4 or 5 rotations through the paddocks. Up there, I'm only going to get 3. I'm going to sacrifice one of those rotations by taking the grass down too tight. Of course, I didn't really sacrifice as much in my eyes, because the production that I got through the winter, not having to feed hay, and the paddocks are smaller because the winter forages are so much forage, I'm gaining those paddocks back in my winter months. So it's a give and take on how you do it. There you have it. Hope this video helps. Please continue to watch us and leave us your comments. Let me know what you'd like to see or what questions you have, what I can do and what I can show you that would help you on your farm. That's what we're interested with here. If you're local, please come and visit us. Get in touch with us if you're interested in beef or pork. And we do have some exciting new builds. I got a build right now where I'm building a mobile cart, whatever you want to call it, chicken tractor. And so it's not even a small chicken tractor. It's 12 by 24. It's going to be for our egg layers only, specifically for them. Automatic waters, automatic feeders, roll-away nest boxes. I'll be able to pull it up to the barn and plug it into electricity in the winter. So it's one chicken tractor that I can keep year-round our chickens in, and I can house them in the winter, or I can turn it into the chicken tractor in the pasture when we want to do them that way. So there's pros and cons to that. I'll get all into that video, but look forward to that. Thanks for watching.